Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome to another P Cubed Film School. I'm your host, Raph, my co-host, Lauren, and we are joined by other host/panelists here. We've got Rose.
Hi.
And Troy.
Yo.
The usual crew, I suppose, so far for P Cubed Film School. We've been watching a good few movies together. Now, I was saying before we started rolling here, I am profoundly envious of our guests today because I thought seeing Alien and Aliens for the first time was a big deal. But y'all are about to see The Thing for the first time. And I would pay good money to have that experience once again. Seriously. These first three movies for film school have been incredible films to watch for the first time. And I feel so privileged that I get to join you guys on that roller coaster. So this is Spooky Month officially. It's October.
That's what they say.
Yeah, it's Spooky Month. You can tell by everybody's usernames. Hush. So people don't know that. They could be watching this at any time. They could be watching this in October of next year. But all you need to know is that it's currently October. But so I guess that officially makes this our Halloween special. So we figured, why not commemorate the holiday like we plan to later this year? We definitely have a Christmas movie coming up.
Oh, yeah. That's a Christmas movie.
Oh, yeah. So why not commemorate this holiday as well with a horror movie? Not that we haven't been doing horror movies so far on this show. In fact, I think everything we have watched is some kind of horror. So par for the course, I suppose. I guess it turns out we just like horror movies. Do you think this is true, Lauren?
No, absolutely. A lot of our formative movies were horror films.
I guess that's true. Well, that's because our cousin, a gentleman by the name of Robert, who's also a filmmaker nowadays as well, was a big part of, I think, our early introduction to film culture. And he showed us a lot of horror films that when we were young.
That we watched when you were young. Well, just like I think he just introduced us to culture.
Really? Lauren disappeared again. Oh no. This has been an issue. For some reason, Discord keeps kicking Lauren out. Oh, we can't hear you.
The thing.
Hello?
Okay, now we hear you.
Did Lauren get replaced?
Lauren has been replaced by a shapeshifter that cannot sync audio and visual movement.
You're not self-synced on my end too. I'm gonna be right back.
Oh, hold on. You're normal now.
You're good.
Oh no! Right when he got normal.
Okay, I disconnected. I don't know why that keeps happening. I have no idea.
It's okay. I won't cut it. So, The Thing. That's what we're talking about here tonight, The Thing. So, I'm so excited. This is such a good movie. While I was looking into it again and preparing for this film school, I was just reminded of how awesome this movie is. There's literally nothing else to do, really, while studying this movie, except to be reminded and in awe of what this movie is. So, as a brief introduction, of course, we got our preamble before we go into the film. This is always how we watch movies. You got to set the stage. So, first thing of note, this isn't really a necessary fact, but I think it's fun little trivia. This is a remake. This is a remake of the film The Thing from Another World, which came out in 1951. However, John Carpenter doesn't really see it as a remake. John Carpenter being the director of this film. He kind of sees it more as just another adaptation of the same source material, which is a novella. Yeah,
short story.
Yeah. I think they call it a short story in the credits, but it is a novella called Who Goes There?
Okay.
Yeah, Who Goes There is the name of the novella. And so this film, as we've already implied, has quite a legacy. It has a legacy really as one of the greatest horror films of all time. And it is,
I would say,
highly influential. It's hard to understate the influence of this film. Much like all the films we've watched thus far. Oh yeah, The Thing is highly influential on a number of levels, right? Obviously, like its particular brand of body horror has been highly visually influential. Like Resident Evil pretty much ripped off this film's entire monster aesthetic for a majority of the creature designs throughout the entire franchise. From like at least 2 onward. I think Resident Evil 1 had more of like deliberately had more of a George Romero / Sam Raimi kind of aesthetic, whereas like from 2 onward they started really getting into the Thing style of body horror, and except, you know, they kind of perfected the formula with stuff like the G virus. But
I was gonna say, like, was that when the G virus started popping around?
yeah, the G virus definitely. Well, interestingly, Resident Evil 2 has ripped on a lot of pretty much all the movies we've watched so far, right? Because the way the G virus implants and then births out of people was straight up homage to Aliens. And then the way the creature looks as it matures, as when someone gets infected by it, in the case of Birkin, is straight up the Thing style stuff. But now you're going to see the origin of that style of body horror. I really don't think that this particular aesthetic had been done before this film, but I'm open to being corrected about that for film buffs who may be watching. But from what I understand, this kind of invented this particular brand of body horror. I don't even think Cronenberg was doing this kind of stuff beforehand.
Well, that's interesting, because I was just reading a quote by Carpenter who was saying, like, when he was making the film, like in the original film, The Thing, what was it, in the 50s?
The Thing from Another World was the name of that one.
That's the full name.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a guy in a suit, as it is classically done. Is that is effect of just like, oh, it's an alien, it's a guy in a suit. Which
classic monster movie.
Yeah, classic monster movie. But he didn't want that. He specifically did not want to make a movie with just another guy in a suit monster. So like he thought one of his biggest worries was like, people are gonna laugh at us. It's like you can't just try to make a serious horror film and put a guy in a suit. It's got to be something different. It's got to be something unique. So he specifically went out and tried to make something unique and different.
Yeah, something alien, really.
Completely alien.
Yeah.
And like he sees it more of just an adaptation of the short film, or the short story, the novella, because the novella was more conceptual in its alien design as opposed to visual.
Yeah.
For reasons you'll see in the film.
Yeah.
Because it is a very apparently spiritually accurate to the atmosphere of the short story.
Yeah, and that's from what I understand from people who know better and are actually familiar with the source material. From what I understand, yeah, that was John Carpenter. Part of John Carpenter's goal was to do a more accurate adaptation, and from what I understand, he very much succeeded at that.
Yeah.
I hear this is a lot more spiritually faithful to the novella. So, that being said, yeah, highly influential, and not only for its like body horror style of monster design, but also for just like paranoid imposter stories generally. Right now, we're seeing a bit of a resurgence of that. You know, things like games like Among Us, which is very much modeled after this film, is a bit in the pop culture zeitgeist for a second there. Really, Among Us, it's hard to frame Among Us as anything but the Thing homage, right?
Homage.
Yeah, like it pretty deliberately plays off of the fantasy of this style of storytelling. So yeah, this film has remained hugely influential for decades upon decades upon decades. It's really stood the test of time, and that is why we're still watching it here in 2021, almost 40 years to the year, just shy of 40 years after the film originally released. So let's talk about.
I feel young.
Does that make you feel young? I mean,
It makes
you should feel young. You are young.
You are young.
You're a wee baby.
oh.
So, as usual, we got to talk about some of the artistry involved in this piece, because there is some extraordinary talent backing this entire film. Not least, of course, we got to talk about the director, John Carpenter, legendary film director of... He's kind of known nowadays as like one of the great masters of horror films, but I think that's doing him a disservice because he is pretty multi-genre throughout his entire career. I consider him generally a maker of genre films.
Yeah.
Essentially. Like, he did a number of horror films, obviously, but he actually did pretty decent action films. He did a lot. Like, he did Assault on Precinct 13, which is a pretty
amazing. Well, it kind of also Assault on Precinct 13 is also kind of a horror film as well.
Also kind of a horror film, but it's a pretty...
in a very subversive way.
Yeah, in a very subversive way, yeah, it is a horror film, but it is
because like
essentially a landmark action film. Yeah.
Yeah, it's technically a zombie film, but it's a zombie film packaged as an action film.
Yeah, which is in much the same vein as one of the films it later inspired, The Raid, right? The Raid is very much a horror film as well. There's a way of watching it that is a horror film. And it was directed by a horror director, right? I'm trying to remember his name off the top of my head. Gareth Evans. Mm-hmm. Gareth Evans is a horror film director, typically. who's now kind of known for doing action movies because of the Raid franchise. But you could definitely see his horror roots coming through in the way he directs that film. But I think that's generally part of the trend that I've observed, that horror and action have a lot more overlap than people like to give them credit for. And it's nice to hear other people talking about this as well, because I heard Scott Adkins make that same observation in one of his Art of Action podcast episodes. But yeah, John Carpenter, legendary film director. Well, first off, from everybody here, what's our familiarity levels at with John Carpenter? Anybody know that name?
Halloween.
There you go. That's probably what he's most known for.
That's a big one.
Rose, I think I know your answer.
No.
Zilch. And obviously, Lauren, you know John Carpenter pretty well. I think we've seen all the same John Carpenter movies, except you haven't seen Escape LA, but that's okay. You don't need to. That movie is, that's pretty meh. Escape New York is a way better movie.
New York, Big Trouble in Little China.
Yes, Big Trouble in Little China. Obviously, The Thing. They Live. Films like that. So Halloween, yeah, is probably what he's most known for, where he invented another horror archetype, which is the invincible stalker baddie. Which obviously inspired a lot of other things. Then you get the Terminator, and then I think the Terminator and Halloween really solidified that archetype in the horror genre. So that's John Carpenter, absolutely influential filmmaker and film composer. He scores most of his own films, actually, which is interesting because The Thing is a notable exception. He did not score this film. He did not do the music for this film, even though he directed it. So we're going to get to the score in a second, though, because there's a lot to say about the score of this film. But that's John Carpenter. His resume speaks for itself. He really is the kind of director that needs very little introduction, so we're not going to spend too much time focusing on him. Instead, I want to talk about guys like Rob Botton. And it's really hard to talk about The Thing separate from the legacy of Rob Botton. This was really his movie. So he's perhaps a name you don't normally hear when people talk about films like these. However, for the diehard film enthusiasts and buffs, this is definitely the kind of person you need to talk about when talking about this film. And because he's in a position of particular technical artistry that generally doesn't get talked about in the industry. It's not glamorized, which is that he is a special makeup effects artist. That's his job. He's a special makeup effects artist.
Special effects and makeup.
Special effects makeup, particularly. It's makeup that is special effects.
Yes.
So he worked on, obviously, this film. I would argue that this was his masterpiece, but you could see his work in a whole slew of other iconic films: RoboCop, Total Recall, Legend, Seven. He did a number of films with David Fincher, including Seven and Fight Club.
That is interesting.
Yeah. So
he did an episode of Game of Thrones.
He did do an episode of Game of Thrones. Yeah, in the early 2000s, for some reason, he kind of dropped off the map. Didn't do a lot of films or any film and television work after that. And that's still one of the great mysteries of Hollywood. Nobody knows why he dropped off the map. He just stopped working for a while for some reason in the early 2000s, and generally only comes out of the woodworks every once in a while nowadays. But he was an extraordinary talent, as you're about to hear. First off, it should be no surprise that he's an extraordinary talent, because he belongs to a long lineage of special makeup effects artists that are all quite legendary in their own right. He was mentored by Rick Baker, who is pretty notable in and of himself, but who was also mentored by Dick Smith. Rick Baker mentored, or rather, Rob Botton was mentored by Rick Baker. Rick Baker was mentored by Dick Smith. And Dick Smith, if you don't know that name, is an absolutely legendary makeup effects artist. He's probably the biggest name in that industry. Like, if there was one person who is the special makeup effects artist, it would be Dick Smith. He's probably the only one that I know off the top of my head.
Really?
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about his work, because his resume speaks for itself. He is the artist behind The Godfather. He did The Exorcist. He did Taxi Driver, right? If you've seen the climactic sequence of Taxi Driver, he was pretty much the mastermind behind that. And lest we forget, Scanners.
Scanners?
Yeah, he did. Dick Smith did Scanners. Yeah. which I still haven't seen that film, but I think we've all seen the GIFs from Scanners of.
Hello.
I've heard of all those films except Scanners, but
Yeah, Scanners is a classic body horror film. Yeah, Lauren, post the GIF. It's definitely a GIF you've seen before, because it is all over the internet. But yeah, The Godfather was obviously a huge revolution. The Exorcist, huge revolution. Taxi Driver was super innovative, especially with the gore he did in the climactic sequence. And he was an absolute pioneer of the medium. He invented makeup techniques that are now the standard in the film industry to this day. And he had to invent them because he had no formal training. He was completely self-taught. And then he passed on a lot of his knowledge to Rick Baker, who then passed on a lot of that knowledge to Rob Botton. So the thing about Rob Botton is he was also self-taught. I'm starting to think there's something to this self-teaching business.
Well, because there's something that comes out of people who are actively seeking that kind of knowledge. If you are taught it, it's school and it's work. If you are seeking it, it is a hobby and it is a passion.
Mm-hmm. And there's something to be said about doing that in the pre-internet age too.
Yeah.
Because in the pre-internet age, these people would have to have absolutely hunted for that information. And if they couldn't find it, or even if they could find it, like all the practice and all the hands-on they would have to get, like essentially a majority of their knowledge would have to come from hands-on after a certain point of just doing and trying to make effects happen. So Rob Botton was self-taught and eventually was hired by Rick Baker directly at 14 years of age after simply submitting a portfolio of illustrations. Doesn't that sound like the American dream?
Right.
He just put together a portfolio of illustrations, sent it to his hero, Rick Baker, and he was like, this kid's got talent. I'm going to hire him at 14 years of age. Mm-hmm. And
that young.
Yeah. And then history happened. So his career started out circa 1976. From 76 to 78, those were like his early years. During that time, he was mostly just an assistant to Rick Baker, and he did makeup on a number of films. Also, fun fact, he designed a lot of the key players in the Cantina Band in the original Star Wars, and he also plays one of the Cantina Band members.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, completely uncredited for both the designs and the acting, but there was a young Rick Baker in there, or rather, young Rob Botton in there. So then in 1979, a little film called The Fog comes out. This is another John Carpenter horror classic. And it was on.
They meet, right?
Yeah, this is the film that introduced him to John Carpenter. Obviously, he was familiar with John Carpenter's work, like everybody at the time was. But this was how he got introduced to Carpenter and finally got a gig on one of his films. And so he did a lot of apparently dope special makeup effects for The Fog. The Fog is actually one I still haven't seen yet. I probably should, though, because I love Carpenter's work. But he did a bunch of special makeup effects, and I think also played one of the baddies in that film, because apparently he's actually a huge dude. So he's like 6.5 feet tall or something crazy like that. So yeah, he got to go into some of his effects in playing one of the baddies in that film, of a ghost type specter creature. So that was how he got introduced to John Carpenter. All right, now they've got a working relationship. Fast forward 2 years, 1981, a little film called The Howling comes out. And this was probably, up to this point, he'd been working mostly as an assistant to Rick Baker. But this was probably his big solo break. This is when people really started to recognize his talent as a standalone makeup artist. And in this film, he designed werewolf transformation sequences. And then this film ended up being released just months before his mentor, Rick Baker, did the same thing in a more famous film called An American Werewolf in London. Now, An American Werewolf in London, the werewolf transformation, I haven't seen that film in a long time, but I think anybody who's seen it, the werewolf transformation is burned into your brain.
Yeah, it's legendary.
Legendary werewolf transformation sequence in the early 80s too, but this was in the peak where people like these makeup artists were doing really innovative stuff in the realm of monster effects. And obviously that one got a lot more attention, but The Howling did it first. But obviously they were probably filmed around the same time and could not have had any cross-contamination. So that was purely coincidence mostly, but it's just kind of funny that was him and his mentor both doing their own take on a werewolf transformation in the same year. But that got him a lot of attention. So it's like, okay, clearly now everybody knows this kid's got talent in the industry. Very next year, 1982, comes the film we are about to see, which is The Thing. And like I said, this film is hands down Rob Botton's masterpiece. It's really a masterpiece of the genre in terms of the effects. Like I said, visually, it's hard to understate the influence of this film. And as we were saying, I think even before we started recording, on a technical visual artistry level, this film is simply an achievement. It blows my mind still to this day that it even exists.
It is a cinematic miracle that it happened.
Yeah. So get this, you ready to feel bad?
What do you mean?
Rob Botton was 22 years old when he worked on this film.
Yep.
Oh,
So-
that hurts.
I didn't feel bad yet.
Yeah.
You still got a couple years to go.
Yeah, you got a couple years before you could be like, oh man, Rob Botton was 22 years old when he worked on The Thing.
He worked on the greatest horror film of all time.
Yeah, when you see the effects in this film and think about, I hope you don't think about this while we're watching. I hope you're too immersed to think about it. But afterwards, I hope you stop and go, that was a 22-year-old leading the effects on this film. Wow, what an achievement. He never outdid himself since then, even though he did do plenty of great work.
Yeah.
But it's honestly, in my opinion, one of the greatest crimes in all of film history that A, Citizen Kane never won any Oscars, and B, The Thing was never nominated for a single Oscar. But we'll get into that in a bit because there are very specific reasons why. But yeah, Rob Botton, 22 years of age. John Carpenter's worked with him before. He says, you're the guy. I've got this alien movie. Let's make some horror. And needless to say, this is a highly ambitious project. At the peak of production, he was leading a team of about 35 artists and technicians. And quite frankly, he took the bulk of the workload. He famously lived and worked on the Universal Pictures set where this was being shot. And although the principal photography only took a few months to wrap, shooting all of the effects and all of that second unit stuff, that lasted well over a year. And during that year and several weeks of time, he was working and living on the set 7 days a week, including nights and all sorts of crazy stuff.
Like, apparently that had like an actual like medical effect on his body.
Oh,
He was
yeah.
hospitalized
Yeah.
for exhaustion.
Yeah,
Like,
he almost died for this film.
Literally, like, almost died for this film.
Yeah, so yeah, after filming Wrapped, John Carpenter immediately told him to go to the hospital, and where he was hospitalized with extreme exhaustion and pneumonia, apparently.
And pneumonia.
So
Because he all he did was work on this film.
for more than a year straight, the only thing he did was work on this film and eat and sleep.
That
So
sounds like a passion project to me.
yeah, well, when it comes to films like this, you only get this level of effects because you have a lot of money or you have that level of dedication.
Yeah.
And I can assure you, they didn't have the money for this film. This was not a well-funded blockbuster. I mean, it was a well-funded studio picture film, but yeah, this was by no means a massive blockbuster like $50 million or whatever it would have been because of inflation. Nowadays, like, a blockbuster would be considered $100 to $150 plus million you would spend on a blockbuster like an Avengers film. But I'm not sure what the numbers would have been like back then. That'd be a lot of reverse math to try and undo inflation. But this, even by the standards of its time, wasn't necessarily a massive blockbuster. But they had Rob Botton, who just dedicated himself.
Just willing. That was it. He was just willing.
Just made of, he's 22 years old and made of sheer willpower and imagination.
He's young and dumb and full of work.
Exactly. So, and it's a shame, like I said, that this film at the time didn't get the recognition that it deserved. But when you see the kind of effects they pulled off for this film that still hold up, that's the impressive part, still hold up to this day, you'll realize why this guy pulled so much overtime and how worth it was. So that's me gushing about Rob Botton and his effects in this film. A couple last points of note before we get into the film itself. The music. Absolutely iconic atmospheric score for this film. This film was scored by a well-known film composer named Ennio Morricone. That's probably a familiar name to a lot of film buffs. He created many iconic film scores. Namely, he worked on Sergio Leone's Man with No Name trilogy. That is probably his most recognizable work. If you ever heard the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly theme song, then you know.
Classic theme song.
Oh,
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know that one.
Oh, yeah. He did the score for that entire trilogy of Sergio Leone's spaghetti westerns with Clint Eastwood. So he did the score for this film, and it's a pretty iconic score in and of itself. There's a lot to be said about the music, and we're going to talk about probably the music a bit more after we watch the film, because I don't want to say much more about how good the music is, but it's such good artistry. And Ennio Morricone, it's worth noting, scored another film more recently in which he directly replicated the score of this film, in essence.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, I think you know what I'm talking about. The Hateful Eight.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The Hateful Eight is a Quentin Tarantino film that is essentially a Western remake of this film. And in order to emphasize that, he hired Ennio Morricone to do the score. And it's essentially the same thing that he did on this movie. So that's a fun little tie-in about The Hateful Eight. Obviously, very different films, but the homage is very clear. Yeah. Very clear.
It's especially when you know what to look for. It's it is a spiritual like remake, like same atmosphere, same themes, all that stuff, but completely different setting, completely different tone.
Yeah, different characters.
Yeah.
All that. Although one of them, literally the exact same actor. There is Kurt Russell is in both films, so there's that. Also, who here has seen Kurt Russell movies? Anybody know who that is? Besides Lauren and I.
No.
I think I haven't seen many of his films, but I know I've seen him in a few.
Yeah. Have you seen Escape New York or Escape from New York?
No, I haven't.
That's probably his most known for role, because obviously that character just kind of became iconic, and then it inspired a lot of video game characters like Solid Snake and all that. But yeah, which is kind of interesting that we're talking about him for this. I didn't really want to talk about Kurt Russell before we go into this film, because I feel like knowing about Kurt Russell doesn't really help you with this film. This is a bit out of type. Yeah, because he's known as like an action star, basically. Yeah. And this isn't an action movie. So he's just kind of there because he works with John Carpenter a lot.
Yeah, it's a very dramatic role.
Yeah. In fact, a lot of actors that John Carpenter works with a lot are in this film.
I was going to say he's sort of the Bruce Campbell to Carpenter's Sam Raimi.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good comparison. Every director has to have that actor that they can work with whenever. So, one last piece of artistry I want to draw attention to before we get into the film. And I want to draw attention to this because of the fact that this would have been a lot of people's first impression of the film going into the film. And I think it should be yours too, which is the iconic poster for this movie.
Such good graphic design.
It's such good design, isn't it? This is a classic movie poster, and this, well, let's be frank, this is probably mostly what sold the film in the ye old days where trailers weren't as big of a deal because they weren't as accessible. This is such a good poster. And
well, here's the thing.
Oh, give it to me, Lauren. Give it to me. Talk about design.
Well, because I'm just talking about like how you watch movies back then.
It's true.
You had to be in the right place at the right time to watch a trailer. Nowadays, you can run into those things left and right.
Yeah,
but
even if you don't want to.
Even if you don't want to. I watched a trailer the other day, and I don't even watch trailers because I ran into it. But when it comes to going to a movie theater, basically the experience was, let's watch a movie. Let's go to the theaters and see what's playing.
Look at the posters.
Yeah, you go to the theater and you see the wall of posters and say, that one. You see this. You see this brilliant poster just mixed in with whatever is playing at the time. It's mysterious. There is clearly like something happening with this humanoid creature that's like, oh, the ultimate in alien terror, but that's a person. I am confused and intrigued. Let me watch this movie.
And slightly aroused.
This is the best fear mode I've ever had. But it gives away nothing of the film, obviously, and it is extremely evocative with abstract and with abstract imagery mixed in with familiar imagery that just makes you question what exactly is going on with this. It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's what I love. Yeah, a little bit of the setting. And that's what I love about this poster too, what you just drew attention to, which is how abstract it is. Because it is very much not a literal representation of what you're going to get out of the film. But it is such a good thematic design representation.
It draws you in because you need answers.
Yes. And here's some fun facts that I wanted to share about this, because I remember coming across this thread a while ago, and I wanted to be sure to bring it up. So this poster was designed by Drew Struzan, I think is how you say his name. He was a very renowned film poster designer. He designed over 150 movie posters over the course of his career, including some of them were illustrated, some of them were just graphic design or, photo bashing, things like that. But he did a lot of stuff. He did probably more notably the entire Star Wars trilogy of the original trilogy, those iconic pulpy style illustrations. He did the Back to the Future films. He did the Indiana Jones films. All of those were drawn by him. So, as well as a slew of other really iconic movie posters, Blade Runner, Shawshank Redemption, all that stuff. So
I love all the posters. Those are so good.
Yes, so good, so good. Now, the thing with the thing is... there it is again. Here's the thing.
I guess you could say he drew it.
That is the thing. So apparently, not only is this one of his more iconic posters, even given the fact that he's done so many iconic posters, but this entire poster was conceived, illustrated, and delivered to the studio all within a 24-hour period.
No way.
Yes.
I can see that, but he must have been hit by some inspiration, because
he was,
man,
this guy was struck by lightning.
It's that what happened to him is what's happening in the poster.
It's a self-portrait. It's a self-portrait of what his mind was like making this poster. The studio was like, we need a poster. Deadline's in 24 hours. Oh, snap. And just
it's just like
freaking, just pumps this thing out in a fugue state.
He turns it into, he wakes up the next day, he's like, I got a poster to finish. You did a great job. What happened? I
freaking blacked out.
I blacked out, man.
So, let me go ahead and share the link for this Twitter thread he did. He also includes a video of him and his wife recounting the story. But let me go ahead and, for the record, read out for listeners, especially, what's going on in this thread, which is he said, they needed a poster for John Carpenter's The Thing in a hurry. So I conceived it, painted it, and my art was delivered to the studio all within 24 hours. In fact, when they put it under the glass to photograph it, the paint stuck to the glass because the thing was still wet.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That is...
So you want to talk about the number of miracles that had to happen to make this film what it was. That is amazing. And if I understand how these things work, he would have been in a competition with other designs too.
Yeah.
But his was favored by the producers. So he just comes up with that the last possible minute, 24 hours to deliver a poster. He conceives it, the composition, everything, the theme, and illustrates it and delivers it to the studio, still drying the paint, and the rest is history. What a legend. So, yeah, perhaps later on it might be worth checking out that video he includes in that thread of his wife telling the story of what it was like from her perspective, as it's hilarious. That is a lot of the things that just added up to culminate in the experience you're about to have. So now that you have an appreciation of all the blood, sweat, and tears that went into this thing, I think it's high time you watch what might be one of my favorite horror films of all time, The Thing.
I'm excited.
Let's do it.
You're not ready.
You really aren't. Nothing can prepare you for The Thing.
Oh no.
All right, and welcome back. So, how are we doing after that film?
Yeah. That was really ambiguous.
Yeah, that ending was pretty ambiguous, but the film overall, it had a good atmosphere about it.
Yeah, that was... Oof. That's one heck of a movie. You were saying too, Troy, in our chat that you thought the ending was mighty ambitious, and yeah, that is definitely. I thought you said ambitious.
No, I said ambiguous.
It is an ambitious ending, though. For this kind of film, that is a super ambitious ending. That took a lot of. I think that took a lot of restraint to end a film that way, because the natural artistic inclination is to answer every question. And so it is both ambiguous and ambitious in that sense.
Yeah.
Because not everybody has the strength to write an ending like that. Like, that requires an extraordinary amount of restraint.
I definitely agree. But
Oh no, what happened?
They all died.
Oh,
eventually.
you want to know what happened? Yeah, eventually. Well, I mean, that's the thing, right? It's super ambiguous. You don't know.
You don't know how they died.
Yeah, it could be in a number of ways. And either one of them could be the thing. But yeah, any other immediate thoughts or reactions jump out to you?
I really like how they show off the creature.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they show it pretty well too. That's the thing, is there's obviously a lot of trickery going on and a lot of lighting effects used to hide the seams, and a lot of camera compositional tricks used to hide the seams as well. But they're pretty confident enough in the actual models themselves to put them pretty front and center.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like for a long time too.
Yeah, surprising amount of screen time. Like, it's not like super cut up or anything where you can tell they've got a lot to hide.
Because when you have like model makers and effects prop makers who are that good, making like full not like it's not just like prosthetics and makeup, but like full animatronics, and we'll talk more about like how they achieved those specific effects in a little bit, but like you gotta show that off, because it looks extremely good on film.
Oh yeah.
And the amount of stuff that they did to get those creatures to move and act and do in front of a camera what you would expect it to do was just immense.
What were you saying beforehand, Rose? There was something you really liked.
Oh yeah, I like how like at the start when it's like showing off the creature and like the bodies and stuff, it's like showing you parts of it. It's not really giving you like a whole picture.
Oh, and they're in the Norwegian camp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And you get that mid-transformation model, which must have been fun to make, seeing as that one didn't have to move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the one time it does move, it's under a sheet, so it could have been anything. Like, that's easy peasy, which is a great moment.
You gradually just get to see more and more of it.
Mm-hmm. Up to that final climactic shot of the big final form version, which I always thought was super ambitious. I love that bit where you see that shockwave coming towards McCready during the final confrontation. It's like, that is terrifying.
And it just goes up from the floor. It's like, nope, give me that. Give me that.
Yeah, it grabs the plunger.
You are not gonna blow me up today.
Yeah, that was awesome. And it kind of had like the mold of all the different forms combined, along with a big chomper on the top.
Yep. From some planet, we don't know where that one came from, but
yeah, that's true. Any other initial reactions or thoughts that anybody wants to note before we go into some more detail?
About the final confrontation, that was fairly anticlimactic, honestly.
You think so?
I mean, sure, the thing was revealed again in all of its gory glory, but McCready was like, no, screw this. I'm just going to blow it up. He lights dynamite, gets out of Dodge. Boom, it's dead.
Yeah, he got a one-liner in there, too.
He did. Classic Kurt Russell.
Yep.
I also really like the cinematography.
Oh, yeah. It was extraordinarily well shot.
It's not like full, like, what did you refer to it as?
What, like that kind of art house style, or?
Yeah, it's like, it's not full art house, but it's not full the other one.
Oh, like super like Hollywood-y.
Yeah, it feels like a mix of kind of both.
Well, John Carpenter, that's one thing about his films that I really enjoy, is that it is that kind of mix of both, where he does super genre films, and does them in a way that is commercially appeasing, but it's like also somewhere in between where it's really well shot, really patiently paced, but also really efficiently paced when it needs to. Like, you probably noticed the pacing alters quite dramatically depending on the needs of the scene throughout this film. On some points, for example, the blood test. The blood test is a great example, and we were talking a bit about that before we started recording. A great example of his mastery over pacing in order to tell the story at the rate it needs to be. Because, like, that scene moves super gradually as they're going through the test. It's very slow. You see everything in real time as they go one by one doing the tests until they get a hit. And then it's big. It's still moving essentially at the same rate, but it's big, it's loud. It's one of these horror set pieces that you're used to seeing throughout the film at this point. Every time it pops up, it's always a huge moment, and it's massive and has huge energy, and it's just really chaotic in the way the scene moves. But then as soon as they're done with that, right, that's the big midpoint of that suspense sequence. Then all of a sudden, it starts picking up a little bit more, because it's like, okay, now you know what will happen if they get a hit. And so now we're just going to cut to the information that you need to see, which is do the test. And then as soon as they do administer the next test, hard cut to that person being out of the chair. And it's brilliant. It's brilliant how they play with the audience's perception of time like that in a way to match the needs of each scene, so that you never essentially feel like you're wasting time, because you get the slowness when you don't know what's going to happen. And then once you've seen it once, then they start picking it up a bit, because it's like, okay, you know the drill by this point.
Yeah. And it's implied that everything that happened in the lead up is happening over and over and over again. And it's just test, test, test. Get the scene over with. Now you know everyone here
is clear. So here's the thing. The thing about the thing. Absolute horror classic nowadays. Really beloved film, especially in the really committed, diehard horror fan base. You hear this film talked about a lot as one of the highest achievements in its particular subgenre of horror. That being said, at the time of its release in 1982, it was a critical and commercial flop. It was a bit of a failure.
That feels like it happens with a lot of movies that you've showed us or talked about.
It does happen pretty often. I suppose, like, well, I guess with Alien and Aliens, those are an exception, because I guess the two film school ones we've done so far were huge box office successes at the time of their release. But with The Thing, that definitely was not the case. It was pretty panned. It was, like I said, both critically and commercially. So it didn't make a whole lot of money, and people didn't like it, like, at all.
I was looking it up. On IMDb, it estimates that it was a $15 million budget approximately, and box office opening weekend was like $6 million.
Oof.
So it made less, like about half on opening day.
Yeah, and opening weekend is always where you make the most money. That's where you have to recuperate the majority of your film's cost.
And that's where
because it only gets smaller from there.
Yeah, and that's how you kind of know, like, pretty much nobody saw it.
Yeah. It was not very well received, and it was not very widely seen. So,
which is just so unfortunate.
I know, it's criminal. It's criminal now that we look back on it. But what you have to consider is the context in which this film was released. First off,
correction. Oh, not 6 million, 3 million.
Oh, that's even worse.
Even worse.
Yeah. Oof. So it was released. Oh, there goes Lauren. Disappeared again. 2 weeks after E.T. came out.
Oh.
Yep. Which was...
Man, that was a box office success, wasn't it?
Yeah, yep. Which was...
That's where all the money went.
Steven Spielberg. Yeah, huge hit. An ultimately positive and uplifting film about an alien.
Yeah. So it's like if you go to the movie theaters, it's like, oh, we're gonna watch an alien film. Between this and E.T., which are you gonna go watch?
Yeah, exactly. One of them you could watch with the whole family, and by this point had probably spread by word of mouth to be a really uplifting film. It had a very positive reputation.
Real good about it.
Yeah, it was very well received. You could walk out of the theater just feeling bright and positive about life and being reminded of childhood or being a child, one or the other. it was just a good time to see E.T. in theaters in 1982. And then 2 weeks later, this film comes out, and it is the polar opposite in terms of a film about an alien. It is bleak. It is dark.
Literally.
Paranoid.
Antarctica.
Yeah, literally bleak. That is very true. I hadn't even considered that. The setting plays such a huge role in the development of its atmosphere. But yeah, literally and figuratively bleak, super dark, and really honestly super pessimistic. It does not have, the film itself does not portray a very positive outlook. And it is so deliberate in its design and its atmosphere in order to draw you into the film's worldview. You know, it draws you into the paranoia, and it draws you into the uncertainty and the ambiguity and just the sheer awfulness of the situation. It puts you in it. And every design decision was made to supplement that just strange, dark, esoteric ambiguity. So that was point number one. That was not in its favor. 2 weeks after E.T. the Extraterrestrial, which everybody loved. And this was also just decades in the aftermath of the height of the Cold War, and still years before the fall of the Berlin Wall, which kind of signaled the end of that whole conflict. But the thing about the Cold War is, right, these are kind of the themes that you're playing with in the Cold War, right? Was paranoia, uncertainty, doom, just the raw emotion of doom, impending doom, existential dread, right? Because nuclear warfare and all that.
You have to stop this or the entire world is going to die.
Yeah, the world is at stake. Those emotions are things that people were very deliberately running away from at the time of this film's release, right? Decades after the height of the Cold War, and still while in the middle of communist regimes kind of reigning in certain blocks of the European world. Like I said, just years before the Berlin Wall came down. So all of that did not jive in this film's favor, and it was seen as very bleak, and the whole paranoia elements were very unpopular in the political climate of the time. And which is probably a large part of why E.T. did so well, because E.T. was, well, let's be frank, it's a very pandering film, right? It comes out in the early 80s, given these same cultural circumstances, and says, let's do something positive. You know?
I haven't seen E.T.
To be fair, I didn't see E.T. for the longest of times either. I saw E.T. as an adult.
I think I remember seeing E.T. on VHS as a kid, but that was a long time ago.
Yeah. Which, to me, probably my hot take is like, E.T.'s really kind of meh. You know what I mean?
Well, because here's the thing. Like, E.T., like, it's not for us anymore.
I guess that's true. Yeah, it's weird seeing it as an adult. Like, it doesn't have the effect it's supposed to have.
Yeah.
Although I'm sure seeing it in a family environment would have been nice as an adult, right? If you see it with your kids.
Like, you're talking about the environment it comes out in. It's like,
people needed that.
Yeah, and it's like it's extremely like you said, it's a little pandering. Where at the time that it came out, it was exactly what everybody needed.
Yeah, it was just like, I'm just going to play to.
It's sickeningly optimistic.
Yeah, sickeningly it's what's the word? It's almost like, yeah, because like kind of playing to what people need. It's almost therapeutic in a sense, right? Exactly. It's like, here's the exact opposite of what we're seeing the world as right now, and well, it's escapism. It's escapist cinema.
Yeah,
which certainly had a place, and certainly. Well, and it has a place, I believe, still. I think a lot of artists are super anti-escapist. But for me personally, I feel like escapism has a solid place within art. And I don't think escapism is to be underestimated, and the power, the raw emotional power that wields. I definitely think there's a place for escapism in art.
There's a time and a place for everything.
Yeah.
But it's just that, like, by no means is E.T. a bad film.
Yeah, by no means. It's still Spielberg.
And it's still amazing. Like, if you watch it, it's like, this is good film, but
solidly made.
Yeah.
Excellent craftsmanship.
I just don't have the nostalgia for it. It's just for me, it's just another film.
Yeah, I think I was kind of the same way. Yeah, I just didn't have the nostalgia. I didn't, grow up with the iconography of that film. I didn't watch it as a youth, and yeah, it just
Culturally, it's still there. It's just I don't like for
it
all the
wasn't
cultural-
mine. Yeah,
Exactly. Like yeah, all the cultural I guess like tropes and everything that came out of it, I still use it. I still borrow it. I love that. But like, if I were to watch the film, I wouldn't get much out of it.
yeah. Yeah, I think I was in kind of the same boat,
Yeah.
which is weird because now, same year for the same reason that like E.T. did, or rather The Thing did super bad. Like I look back on 82 and it's like, this I like. And then he's over there, it's like, man. But even though that was the super commercially and critically successful one, and this is over here, people forgot about it, people kind of stepped on it even. And I'm just like, this stuff was dope. How did people overlook this? Yeah.
Look at all this. Look how much work is going on.
So, yeah. Let's talk about the legacy then of the film, because as the decades passed and the film was removed from its box office and historical context, and most notably the visuals continued to hold up, I think that was the biggest superficial factor that drove its resurgence.
You can watch it anytime. Looks good. Anytime.
Yeah, great looking film.
Looks good today.
Yeah, still looks
a lot of
good.
films today.
It honestly does. It honestly does. The visuals are so impeccably crafted. Yeah, that's a large part of it.
There's real lighting. There's real flesh tones. There's like it's painted, produced, and like talking about the models for the creature, like it's all created with real things that bounce light in realistic ways that actors are really acting against.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is shot on film too, right? Which means that it's going to be, as long as that film stock is preserved, which because of the legacy of this film, it is continually scalable, where these visuals, as long as the original footage was shot good, the visuals will continue to look good because we'll continue to be able to update film stock to modern resolutions. So that's the thing. I mean, I'm holding in my hands. It's backwards on my camera, but for the rest,
for you on your camera, we're fine. But
for the audience, for the three of you, it's fine. I might have to do some editing to make this right, but
it's fine.
I'm holding a 4K restoration of this film, right? That's what film can do, and these visuals are still good enough to be able to do that, and it's completely watchable. Right, it's kind of like, well, I think with Aliens as well, as we saw more recently, right, during the last film school. Aliens still looks so good because shot on film with a lot of practical effects that scale with the resolution that you could turn the film stock into. So, that's awesome. But
like in all the matte paintings are painted. There's no pixels there that you have to worry about when you upscale.
It's true. And so, like I said, as the decades rolled on, all these factors combined, people began to see how good it really was. And obviously today it's remembered as one of the greatest horror classics and just one of the best films of the 80s period. Mm-hmm. So huge legacy behind this film. Like I said, it's hard to overstate the influence that it's had. And especially in a lot of the stuff that I have interest in. Like I said, Resident Evil took a whole lot of inspiration from the monster design in this film, and you can tell to this day.
The atmosphere.
Yeah, and especially it only continued to pay that homage and take that inspiration, right? Because I talked about Resident Evil 2, and there's definitely a moment, I think Troy pointed this out, where like an eye pops up on the first dog thing. And you can definitely see that G-Virus design influence and where those ideas originated. But
definitely.
Even, you go further down the line, right? Resident Evil 4, the Plaga mutations, like, were pretty much exactly the same kind of style, but to a much larger scale.
Yes.
All the tentacles and the...
Oh, yeah. And I love those effects. The way the tentacles were flailing about, it was just so lifelike. And for me, there was almost never a point in this film where the effects draw attention to themselves as something unreal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They constantly look...
It feels organic.
And move like something living. And that was a huge part of John Carpenter's ambition with this film. Let's talk about that in a bit. But yeah, as far as the effects, Botton and his team pretty much used every magic trick in the book to make this thing happen. We're talking puppetry, animatronics, reverse photography, whole lot of reverse photography.
A lot of reverse photography, a lot of it.
Yeah,
What's
squibs,
reverse
molds.
photography?
What was that?
What's reverse photography?
Oh. So this is
there.
one of the oldest film tricks, and honestly, one of the most potent film tricks, because it's such a simple trick. It's literally as old as film itself. It's been done since the beginning. One of the earliest magic tricks of film. It's super simple, and yet it is capable, if used creatively, to produce all sorts of effects that just leave people stunned of the kind of how did they do that kind of thing. I think one of the biggest how did they do that kind of shots in this film was achieved using reverse photography, which was the tongue whip, right? Yes. When Norris's head is like falling on the ground and his tongue is just like and just grabs onto a chair. Reverse photography.
So reverse photography is literally where you shoot something and then play it back in reverse. So the frames are played in opposite order. So the way that it is used to either like for extremely precise effects like that. So every time basically somebody gets grabbed by a tongue, it's reverse photography. They have the tongue wrapped around them and then they shoot the film of them yanking the tongue off, play it in reverse, the tongue goes whoosh, and very accurately positions itself exactly where it needs to be because that's where they set it up to at first. When you play it backwards, that's where it ends up at the end of the clip. So you can get all kinds of different effects like that where like with the tongues where it needs to latch onto something extremely accurately, done in reverse photography. A lot of effects where things are coming out of the creature are reverse photography.
You pull them in.
Some of it is reverse photography. Some of it is inflating. Some of it is like
some of them is explosives. Yeah, squibs and stuff.
But when stuff is growing out of it.
Oh yeah,
what they'll do is instead of pushing something out of the creature, they'll pull it back in and play it in reverse, and you get that extremely like vivid. Something is like this creature is growing, but it's easier to have something to pull it back in than it is to push it back out. It's just a lot more accurate that way, and they can get a lot of very specific effects using reverse photography.
Mm-hmm.
But then they also like supplement that with like things that are inflated. So if something's growing out of it, there could be a tube that is inflated that makes it go, that pushes it out, like using hydraulics or not hydraulics, pneumatics, or something along those lines.
Yeah, very clever, right?
A lot of the flailing limbs that are going to go, those are basically just like all air powered things, or that are just like if you ever have like an air hose that gets loose and it goes. That's what the effect is. They just got a bunch of those tentacles, fill it with air, just pump pressurized air through it, and then they start flailing around. And it looks extremely organic because it moves in a way that something would move if it was in real life, because it's real.
Yeah.
It's extremely organic.
Oh,
you get all those effects.
Yeah.
And you just mix and match, and then you combine it however you need it to get the shot to work. And like between cuts, they're using like anywhere between like 2 or 3 different effects at a time just to get the creature to look organic.
Mm-hmm. And it comes together so well because, I mean, like I said, we talked about the amount of passion and dedication that Botton and his team put into this, and it shows because this is just a level of technical artistry that really I don't think had ever been seen all at once at this point yet. Maybe you'd seen all these types of effects separately, but coming together for one cohesive unit, shot after shot for a whole film, it's amazing stuff. I mean, maybe the closest thing I could think is maybe, I don't remember when this came out relative to that, but Jim Henson, right? The stuff he was doing, especially with like the Dark Crystal and things like that. That's the closest thing comparison I can make. But this was super innovative at the time. It's super innovative now. That's the crazy part, is that still requires a whole lot of ambition now. And if you were to do it now, heck, we could probably do it a lot better because technology has improved. But
and also just because the techniques have been around for so long, people have perfected them.
Yeah, people have perfected them. The problem is, generally speaking, that's not the way the effects industry has gone. We've definitely gone the direction of
we've stopped thinking of film. So let's talk a little bit about the history of film.
Yes.
We have stopped thinking about film effects, special effects, in film as magic tricks. Originally, the magicians were the ones that were pushing special effects in film because they're like, hey, I have a stage show that I have to do all this crazy stuff to like get an effect to work. But like in film, I can just fly. I can just remove my head. I can just do all these things. Like there's a lot of this stuff that magicians are like, man, film is the next thing in magic tricks. Like it's just the next evolution of like the visual entertainment industry, which is it was. They were right.
Yeah, it turns out.
But more and more and more, we're starting to forget that that's the origins of special effects in film. And we're like special effects people are less thinking like magicians and thinking like, I don't know,
Technicians,
like
I suppose.
technicians, yeah. Like, but we're not thinking like just like magicians. Like magicians' techniques are super simple in principle, but can be as complicated in technique as you want it to be. The principle of shooting something in reverse and then playing it, or shooting something and then playing it back in reverse, is extremely easy. But like you can do anything with that,
Yeah.
really, and get that as complicated as you want it to be, and then achieve an effect that would have been unheard of, or at least difficult to replicate, because it doesn't look as real, because you're not actually shooting something that is real in the environment with light bouncing off of it in realistic ways. It's just we've stopped thinking about things in terms of magic tricks. Like I was thinking about that scene with the classic plunger scene.
Yeah, the defibrillator. Chest
chomp scene, as it's called.
Yeah.
Like that scene is extremely magician or magic technique heavy. There's a fake table. The table that he is on is filled with there's a technician in the table that he's in that is like pressing vials and getting blood to shoot everywhere and like pulling on stuff to get things to move and puppeteering the creature to like get it to move. Like that whole table that he's on is a fake table. It's a real table, but the fake inside, right? And that is a classic magician's trick, is to have a false bottom. Then when the doctor who has his hands cut off, he reels back and suddenly he's flailing these stumps around as a body double replacement with somebody who's actually a double amputee who doesn't actually have any arms, flailing his arms around.
Yeah, and they just put
trick.
They made a
face mask.
a mask of the actor. And put it on the double amputee.
If you look at the cut of that scene, he's looking away like this because his face doesn't look like the real actor's face. But you can't tell because his arms are waving around in front. He doesn't have any arms. How does he not have any arms? Because he doesn't have any arms. He's a double amputee. You can't get something that real looking without actually putting somebody there who doesn't have any arms. And that's it. That's a body double replacement. That is a magician's trick. That is a classic magician's trick. Is I'm going to pretend that this person who is not the person you just saw is the person you just saw. And
you believe it.
You believe it. Because like when you cut it in between the actual actor, why wouldn't it be the same guy?
Yeah. And that's the magic of film.
So good. But like practical effects, thinking like a magician and using real in-camera effects. Like this film is never gonna not look good because they stuck to those principles of the special effects.
Yeah. Well, and I guess they really didn't have too much of a choice at the time.
Well, I mean, what I mean is they could have just put a man in a suit.
They could have.
But part of what John Carpenter wanted to do was he said specifically, like he wanted every single time they wanted the creature to appear, that it would look different and do something different. Because if it was a creature that could spontaneously shape change, it wouldn't be the same every time.
Yeah, why would it?
Why would it be? Because if it could be anything, it has it's presumed to have access to like however many worlds, we don't know however many worlds it took over before it got to here. It has this memory bank of creatures that we just don't know. We see like bits and pieces of alien creatures pop out of it that we don't have an explanation for. Like there's that at the beginning, a 3-clawed thing shoots up and pulls itself through the ceiling. That's not like anything on Earth that we've ever seen, but that's from some planet from before. It's like they had to make that for that one scene and never use it again. And it's like they could have just made it a man in a suit like they did in the original 51 or 50.
Yeah, it was 51.
51 movie. And it's like this. It wouldn't have been the same.
Wouldn't have been the same.
They made every single effect and every single shot of the creature unique, bespoke, and because of that, it's never going to not look good.
Yeah. And I love that. I love that you talk about that, because that's something I wanted to talk about as well. I had that in my notes, was John Carpenter's design principles, because that's something that I didn't fully realize until I was doing a little bit of extra research for this. But yeah, he was adamant about portraying a creature that simply cannot be seen as just a costumed human like the original film. That was a huge part of his intention, because well, first off, he loved the original film. He adored it. It had a huge effect on him when he was young. But he also recognized that it was a product of its time, where it didn't really innovate on what the formula was for monster movies in that era, which was just a man in a suit. Although the immolation scene from the original film also is pretty dope. That was probably the most ambitious thing they did visually with that, where they burned the dude alive, and they all like team up to friggin' burn the thing while he's running around destroying everything. That's a really ambitious scene. But
In the 51 version?
yeah.
I don't know about that one.
Oh yeah, if you haven't seen the immolation scene, it's probably the climax or something, but it's really it's a really dope looking scene. But yeah, John Carpenter was adamant about updating the effects and the technology and portraying the thing as it should be, which is as something that cannot be seen as a man in a suit, something that is simply not human, something that is truly alien. And apparently that gave him a great deal of relief when he saw the final chest chomping scene, because that was the scene, that was the sequence that he staked his principles on, right? It was like, if that scene worked the way he wanted it to, then he will have accomplished his goal. And he did.
That scene work.
Oh, that scene works so well. It gets me every time. Like once you get to that point and you see the dude's like, you know, going unconscious, it's like, oh, he's not breathing. And you just like, even having seen this film so many times, you clench up getting ready for the chest chomp. You're just like, oh, it's coming.
Like, oh,
it's
no.
coming.
There's no.
It reminded me of a mimic.
Yes, it's totally.
Exactly.
And it's so good. It's just like that. Oh man, I still remember the first time I saw this movie. That scared me so bad. I was so freaked out. Because I was so young and I didn't see it coming at all. How could you see it coming?
How could you see it coming?
Nothing.
It's a mouth in his chest.
How could you see that? And I think I saw Rose's reaction for her first
like,
time.
what the fuck?
In all caps. Oh my goodness, that recaptured the magic for me, because I was just taken back to seeing that for the first time and how freaked out I was, because how could you see that coming?
And then the head pops out and it's just like, what the fuck?
How could you see that? There's no way, because they just throw it in there in the middle of the action, right? They're doing pretty normal stuff. You zap them once. That's the convincer, right? You zap them once and then you're just like,
he's a human.
Yeah, and then you're just like, oh no, he's just having a heart attack or something. It's like, I hope they get him and get him back up, and then it's like zoop, straight through. Oh, yeah. Because it's just such an innocuous looking shot when they cut to the version where the chest opens up, right? You look at it and at a glance, it's like, this is just the continuity of the action we've been seeing so far. He's still laying there. He's still plunging.
You don't need to worry about. Yeah, you don't need to worry about this. Kurt Russell's character right now is freaking out.
Yeah, he's freaking out. The tension's going on over there. This is just like a little side plot. You cut to another angle of it. It's so innocuous looking, but until right in the same shot, without cutting away, his hands go straight through, and then chomp. Oh, how could you see it coming? I was freaked out and disturbed and blown away when I was young and saw seeing this movie for the first time. Oh man. Oh, and it's still so good. It's still so good.
And then Head Spider.
And then you can't beat Head Spider.
Head Spider. That's just gross. Like, I like how it's like it's just trying to scuttle away. It's just like, it's like, you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah. Also, I'd completely forgotten about this until I saw someone pointing it out in one of the articles I was looking at for research. But the guy who says that is the Thing.
Yeah.
Like they show it in the very next scene. And it's like, oh, that's funny. That's rich. Good RP though.
Yeah.
Good RP, alien. Calling yourself out like that.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I love that relief when they do some of the blood tests in some of the characters' eyes, where it's just like, I'm not the thing, right? Like they're unsure, because it begs a super existential question, which is, if you were, would you know?
Here's a question though. We never did get the answer to what the heck happened to all that blood.
Yeah.
Well, 'cause
That was a mystery.
Just somebody got to it.
Somebody got
We
it.
actually don't know because the people who were
Yeah, but what if somebody used that blood to, like, use in the blood test?
Hey, that was my idea.
You did have that idea.
You did.
the thing is, it's just like we don't know who got to it because everybody who was
Well, they
all the
pointed
people who
out.
were suspicious. The two people were like, they were clean.
The two people who had access to be able to open and close that fridge without breaking the lock were human.
Yep, confirmed.
So the question is,
up until a point.
yeah. Well, no, neither of them.
No, that was my thing because
Neither of them turned into the
thing.
thing. Well, actually, I guess he died at the end, so he got assimilated to the big one at the end. But that was at the last minute. But it was like that's at the very end.
The doctor just
The doctor just died. Yeah, he never got infected. He just got his arms chopped off and probably bled out.
bled out on the floor. But yeah, because we don't know who went in there.
Yeah, we genuinely don't know. So, but that is one of the unresolved
also-
mysteries because it leaves.
Probably Blair, and that's the thing too. Like I think Rose is also asking, is like, at what point did Blair get turned? But the thing is, we
keep doing it. That's ambiguous too.
It's hard to do. Well, no, because here's the thing that I was thinking about is like, yeah, that's a good question. When did Blair get turned? But I was thinking, it's like he spent the most time alone with the creature, which wasn't dead.
That's true. So it could have been at any time.
At any time, and we see that. Well, actually, no. Who was it that got bit by the dog in the lounge room or something like that?
Oh yeah, at the very beginning, it shows the dog being alone with somebody's shadow. We don't see who the person is, but it's alone with somebody at one point before it cuts, and it's assumed that it turns somebody at that point.
Yeah, but not even that. Yeah, but there's the part when everybody's in the lounge and the dog's just roaming around, and then like
When he bites someone.
bites somebody, and it's like, ow, what the heck? Somebody get this dog out of here. Who was that?
I think that was the dude that turns in the blood test.
Was it?
I think that was him. That might have been when it happened because they established like even a single particle of this thing can into someone. Which is super smart. Well, that's what I love about this film. It's so well thought out because they say a bunch of really smart stuff and great ideas that they never show, but they show you that the characters are thinking, right?
Yeah.
Because like everybody preparing their own meals and eating out of cans. Super smart. Great call.
Yeah.
And we never see it pay out, but we know that the characters are thinking. We know that they're making plans. We know that they're active.
Yeah, and they're all coming up with solutions, like active solutions, problems. But actually, the problem, the big problem, is that you don't know who you're telling your solution to.
Exactly.
It's like, hey, I've got an idea. It's like, that's a fantastic idea. Let's go and act it. Shoot, we can't because one of us knew about it.
Yeah. And it's so great because like the opening act is so patient, right? I was surprised by like how long it takes to get into the meat of it, but they do a lot of great setup throughout the day because that's the thing you notice, right? The film takes place over the course of one 24-hour period. You go throughout the day until night, and as soon as night hits, that night never ends before the film does.
Just things keep happening.
And McCready never got to sleep. But
where the heck did that generator even go?
I don't know.
Like,
More unanswered question.
Gone.
Yeah, can we fix it? It's gone, man.
It's gone. It's like, okay, where?
Yeah, Rose?
There was also McCready's jacket.
Yes, another unanswered question. Yeah, I think that was the idea, was someone was trying to frame him.
Yeah.
But who?
Could have been anyone.
Could have been anybody.
Also, I love how Blair was just casually building a flying saucer in his basement.
Right, the entire time. I like
everyone else. He was down there playing an entirely different game while everybody else was, playing whodunit. He was just down there, just like building
Playing
stuff.
Minecraft.
Yeah, he was down there playing Minecraft, just tunneled right down and started building.
Everyone else is playing Among Us. He's playing Minecraft. But like, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, I like how when they go back to Blair, when they like check up on me, he's just got a noose, just hanging out, just like, no, I'm fine, I'm good.
Let me out, please.
Let me out, please. It's like, dude, even if you weren't the alien, no,
Yeah.
I'm talking to you through a noose.
It's just such a great frame when it cuts back to him and you just have that noose right next to him. He's just like, I want to get out of here.
I wasn't good before,
guy.
but I'm fine now.
This guy was the one who got bit by the dog.
He's the one
He's
that
the
had
first
that.
one, I
Yeah, I was
think.
gonna say he's the one that has that iconic shot where the hands aren't fully changed, but that was
Yeah.
because he got in the room where
Exactly.
yeah, where the dormant one was. So that dog, I think, just gave him a scare. I think it just brushed him
Okay.
because it doesn't actually show anything what happened. It just
It does.
yeah.
Like watching it again a second time, or however many times. I think I've only seen it a couple of times actually, but I was like, "Ooh, did he like trick him?"
Yeah, that would have been a good hook, but it looks like that was nothing. Dead end. Another red herring, which is what I love.
herring.
Yeah, there were a ton of red herrings in this film, right? And that's what I loved because it's that classic whodunit energy where they're just throwing out clues and leads and all sorts of stuff, and not all of them lead somewhere, which keeps you on your toes as a viewer. It's great for first-time viewers, and it's even just having not seen this film for a few years, it still keeps you on your toes a bit, right? Because you're just like, oh man, I forgot there was so much detail in this film. And then it gets to the end of the film, and it's like, not all that detail mattered. And that's kind of cool, in my opinion, just as a storyteller. It's cool. Don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of really tight scripts, really efficient storytelling. But there's also a place, especially in this style of film where ambiguity is the goal. There's a place for red herrings and there's a place for information that leads nowhere because
especially
it
if
tells
it's
you something about the story.
Yeah, especially if the purpose of the story is paranoia and mystery. Because like, if you as the audience member don't know what information you can and cannot trust, then you're in the same boat as everybody in the film.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's the thing is, and here's what I love, because Rose was talking about this theory about how someone could have cheated the blood test using that stolen bag of blood, or those stolen bags of blood. But there's also the fact that, and that's certainly a possibility, it leaves that possibility open, where you can speculate stuff like that. But so much of the film you could only speculate on. We can only speculate on when Blair got turned.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I love, is that it leaves it open to speculation, and the film itself never does anything unfair.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It doesn't act on twists or on any reversals that are based on information you haven't seen or things that are simply implied, right? If it only gives you it gives you hard facts and it shows you objectively what happens. Nothing that you see in a sense is ambiguous, right? If you can trust what the camera is showing you, and that gives you a foundation to stand on when you're watching the film, right? It doesn't pull any hoodwinks with regard to information that you haven't seen. If it's ambiguous, then oftentimes it'll just kind of leave it that way. But it never throws out any huge twist where it's just like, haha, gotcha, audience member. Sucks to be you, you know, which I love. It's super fair towards the audience in allowing you to construct the story the way you see it without bringing in information that you can't possibly know as a requirement to, make your speculations.
Which also helps that it's a very, very closed setting.
Yes.
That there is a limited amount of things that could happen.
Exactly. And I love that closed setting atmosphere. There's something, I love closed setting stories in general. I don't know if there's a general term for this type of storytelling. I know in television they have like bottle episodes, which are usually in closed settings, but I feel like that term specifically only applies to television because it's about the production of it. Whereas that is a style of storytelling that appears in all kinds of mediums, especially theater. So I don't know I don't know if there's a more general term, but I always generally kind of refer to this type of storytelling as closed setting stories, where it's a singular location, or at the very least an isolated, closed off location that the entire story takes place within. And
you can expect everything to be within this,
within the bounds, of that setting.
You know clearly where it's like where. If you were to start walking off, the game would tell you to come back in.
Exactly, yeah.
You know clearly where the bounds of the story are happening in.
Yes, and I love that type of storytelling, and I think The Thing is just such a great example of it.
This whole movie kind of reminds me of an Agatha Christie novel.
Yeah, it definitely...
A murder whodunit, but it's an alien.
Exactly, and I think that's part of the appeal, right? It is a whodunit at its core, but with an alien. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think I've heard that phrase used by others trying to describe this film. It is, more of a who is it than a who done it. Yeah. Because you know who done it. The Thing did it.
Yeah. But who?
The question is, who is the Thing?
Yeah, he's like, oh yeah, like all this stuff is happening, and it's like, okay, yeah, like we know who's doing this. We know who's turning off the generator.
Yeah, it has an identity.
Yeah, it's like
we know what the creature is
doing it. Rather, it's like, but like, which one of you did it? Which one of you is the person that is the thing that I know did it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there's something, and that's something super Cold War-esque about the ambiguity of the film, isn't it? Yeah. It's just like, you don't know who you can trust, and I know who the enemy is, I just don't know who the enemy is.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like, the enemy is them. Which one of you is them?
Also, one thing I forgot to mention earlier, comparing the cinematography and stuff and like the pacing to Alien, this movie doesn't take like nearly as long setting up the atmosphere. It sort of just like jumps straight into like, this is where we are, this is the story.
Yeah.
A lot. I was saying to Raph too, when they go to the Norwegian base and start looking around, I was like, as soon as they leave, I was like, man, like this movie is like, it isn't, it's going pretty quickly. Like technically, we now know everything we need to know as an audience member to watch the rest of the film.
Yeah. Yeah, once they get back from the base.
Once they get back from base, like technically, they just exposited the entire the drama of what we're expected to be in conflict about, and kind of a little bit of the mechanics of it.
Mm-hmm. And they give you enough information to deduce it from there, and then it's not until the dog kennel scene where you finally, I think that's where they finally put the closure on Act 1 and say, this is what your life is now. This is the rest of the film.
And this is the rest of the film. And it's like, but like everything in that Norwegian outpost was like there was a lot happening.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. And big freaking flying saucer.
And big massive flying saucer.
Which I love that.
Yeah, that's true, because like technically, like, yeah, that's true.
That was a different site, yeah.
But yeah, like watching it again, it's like they found everything they needed, but then they exposited what they actually saw back at their base, which was,
Yeah, and I love that structure, right? Where the whole first act during the day, where they do all the exploration during the day, when by cinematic storytelling rules, it's safe, right? They go out, information gathering. You get all your exposition. You get really the lore, essentially, right, of what it is. Yeah. They do all that exploration, all that information gathering, investigation, all that during the day when it's safe. And then that's the first act. They have all the information that sets you up for the rest of the film, sets you up for the sort of big picture, but with the implication that it's leading up to a little picture that's going to matter a lot more when they get down to it. And then when they get back to settle in for night, that's when the film really begins.
When the storm starts.
When the storm starts and they're stuck there.
And figuratively.
And it's night, which by cinematic storytelling rules means it's no longer safe, because night brings darkness, and darkness brings ambiguity and uncertainty. Yeah, because there are things now that you cannot know. So, yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot to unpack in this film. So
good.
Any other thoughts? Oh, the freaking head crab thing.
Mm-hmm. Head spider, head crab.
Head spider, head crab thing. So I've heard mixed information on that, because I think something had led me to believe at a certain point that was reverse photography, where the legs emerge out of the head in the eye stalks. But I think I read more recently, that it actually isn't, and that was just pushed out through the floor.
Yes. So basically, I thought it was at first too. I think you might have heard it from me because I thought it was, because there are scenes that use reverse photography that have things coming out of them. But that specific one was not. That was them threading tubing through the floor.
Yeah.
And you can tell actually that specific one was not reverse photography because there was a fog in the background of that is moving in forward photography.
Fair point of reference. But yeah,
it's very hard to reverse photography turbulent fluid dynamics. That's literally something I don't think we can do now.
You just need a big vacuum. But yeah, I love that bit. That's a great, clever little bit of just that really. Yeah. Also, Rose, was that what you were saying you hate? There was a lot of stuff you said it was like that you hated, but like there was something in that scene that you just thought was super icky.
Well, just like the slurpy stuff.
Yeah, all the slurp. There was a lot of slurp. There was a lot of slurp. And apparently,
and also just like the scene where like the dude putting his hands in and opens and like grabs it. I was like, oh, I hate that.
Oh, the chest chomp. Yeah, that is like I said, so visceral. And I think honestly, there's so many convincers in that scene. That's one of my favorite sequences in the film, honestly, because there's so many convincers, so many effects that just immerse you, right? Like you watch them and it's like the opposite that a lot of visual effects oftentimes have in big scope films, which is that the more you see of the effects in this film, the more you believe it. You know what I mean? And I think that scene was full of convincers like that, because the whole head detachment shot, that is just one of those things that when I see it, the more I look at it, the more I believe it. And that is disturbing, right? Because it's the tongue. It's the tongue that does it, though, where he's like screaming and his tongue is flailing around.
Yeah.
And what I love, though, is this is a nice little attention to sound detail, is the fact that the creature, the alien itself, had a different voice from everybody else, which is whenever it was revealed and it was screaming while they were killing it, it was making a weird, different sound that was not human, that was distinctively not human. So like when it could imitate humans perfectly, it could talk like them, it could act like them, but when it was in pain, that was the monster itself.
Yeah, that hurts.
Yeah, that was creepy. But yeah, the whole head detachment thing is so well done. That's such a detailed model, man. Like that genuinely looks like the actor. And then just the gloop of the head dropping to the ground.
And the thing is, like, again, talking about just how much bespoke effects they had to do for this film. Like, there's basically 3 shots of the head of that head coming off. Right? It's the head detaching from the body, hitting the floor, and then growing legs. Every single head was a unique effect and a unique thing. So like when it's on the table, there's literally just a guy with a pole on the other end, right off camera, pushing like through the body with something attaching it to the skin material, literally just ripping it, pushing it off the body. And then when it's falling off the table, it's just like they're just letting it like
it's just gravity.
An animatronic. Yeah, they're lowering down with an animatronic head inside that's being puppeted, and they're just like lowering it down like a rope. And then when it hits the ground, they're pushing stuff through the ground to get the feet out, and it's like
every single shot is its own effect.
Every single thing. It's the same head. It's the same shot sequence of events, but like every single time you see it, it's a completely different effect. And it's just there's so much that they do to convince you that this is real and gross.
Yeah, super gross. And that's the thing. Like I said, it's every trick in the book, right? They pull out all the stops, every last little filmic magic trick in order to convince you of the reality of what you're seeing. Honestly, this film is like the Lord of the Rings of horror movies, you know, and just the sheer number of tricks that they use and the sheer variety, just whatever it takes to get the shot.
Yeah, and then like when there's the one that they technically I guess do have a guy in a suit at one point, but in the scene when they're all tied up and they get the the hot iron.
With the head just.
Well, yeah, like because they just have a guy on stilts for that, just walking around.
It's true.
Because when his body just goes whoop, I'm along now. It's just a guy on stilts.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, that was the closest they got to a guy in suit monster stuff.
But then he's got like his head's open.
Then his head splits open. Yeah, they had to innovate somehow.
Well, I didn't realize this, but it looked like what they did was the guy who got head crushed, who was being flailed around, was just a rag doll.
Yeah, he was a dummy.
Basically just being puppeted by the dude and still just going like.
Yeah, although to be fair, that was one of the best dummy uses I've seen. Like that looked. They must have done some work to give it a little bit more weight, because there was something about it that felt a little bit more lifelike than the usual dummy trick that you see, and they had it on screen for a fair amount of time.
Yeah, and it looked really good, but like, just so much stuff they did.
So much good stuff. But yeah, like I said, it's like the Lord of the Rings of horror films, and the sheer number of tricks and the sheer extent of its artistry and the sheer commitment to making every single shot something visually exciting within its big set pieces. And even, like I said, with the freaking head crab, the head spider thing, as it starts walking away, it's almost comedic seeing it go off into the distance in the background as it's trying to sneak away. And
it's like, look at this thing.
But you're never taken out of it. You're never taken out of it. And because it just looks so real, nothing takes you out of it. Because, well, you know how they did that shot?
With the head crab?
Yeah, with especially that shot where it's you could see a wide of it, where the entire thing is in the shot walking away behind MacReady. Yeah. So that was literally just the whole head prop mounted on a remote controlled car.
Yep, and we just RV'd it, just like or RC'd it just across, and its legs were just moving.
Well, the legs were attached to the motor, so that when the motor would spin, it would articulate the legs in a way that almost looked like crawling.
Yeah.
Which is super ingenious. So just a little bit of mechanical finagling. And they hooked it up to the motor so that whenever the motor would spin, it would articulate the legs, and it would
at the appropriate speed.
Yeah, and it would look like it's crawling along the floor perfectly. I mean, like I said, it never takes you out, and it's a background element anyway. The focus is on MacReady, and it's so perfect. Also, I love how, and then they burn it, and I love how it's just sitting there when they catch it. It's just like,
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Well,
I love how he's just sitting there at the end of it. It's just like, what are you doing? He's just like, oh, you got me.
I can't move very fast in this head. Well, actually, something I wanted to say as well. I completely forgot about just how funny this film is.
Yeah,
it's a horror film. Yeah, it's a horror film, but there are so many jokes. Just like visual gags, not jokes, but visual gags. Like,
well, and plus there's just
just kind of walking away behind everybody. That's funny as heck.
That was pretty funny. And
it wasn't pretty funny
because he's just like, look at him. It's just like, what do you think you're doing? You just want to yell at the thing.
But there's also the scene when
you think you can get away. Well, I think what seals it as a funny bit is the fact that it doesn't get away, right?
Yeah.
If it got away, it would have a completely different implication. But the fact that they just catch it immediately makes it kind of funny.
Catch it immediately and just like
stare at it. Yeah.
Gross.
Kill it.
Gotta be kidding me.
Yeah. Oh, so great.
Yeah, but there's like.
Plus, there's the levity of the characters, right? Which their humor and their banter isn't necessarily something that makes the audience laugh, but it makes you believe them more as characters, right? Because that's how people behave in high stress situations. Is like people, right? It's the old freaking Hudson effect, or Private Hudson, right? It's just like that is. It makes you believe the characters more because that is a common reaction to stress. And especially when you consider that these people live together and work together. It's a workplace. Yeah, they know each other well. And it's just high stress workplace banter. And it helps you to believe it because it's just like, yeah, this is how people would react. They would, have these little moments of levity, or at least that can be interpreted as levity. It's just like making a joke, but in a really high stress situation, so you're yelling a joke, but yeah, there's a lot of little moments of levity that kind of root the characters in reality.
Oh yeah, characters are all written like people,
And they actually, and that's what Rosa was pointing out. I was just like, they actually handled this situation pretty well. And that's the thing. There is, and I talked about this earlier, the way they were written, right? Where there's a lot that they show us that they're thinking without ever paying it off cinematically, just because everybody's following logical lines and showing what their characters are doing about the situation. And what I loved is that it's distinguished by some characters that aren't doing that, right? There's some characters, and this is good storytelling, right? Because this is humanity. There's some characters that are just stressed out, and you notice that, right? Some of the characters are, yeah, like Windows. Some of the characters are just followers, right? Because all they have is the panic response. And so the few times that they do take initiative, it's always bad ideas, right? Or like him running to grab the guns right away.
Yeah.
Never productive. But because they're constantly panicking. And it's contrasted with some of the scientists and all the leader figures who are just like, okay, here's the situation. What are we going to do about it? Take practical steps. Like seeing McCready handle the Blair situation where they're in where he's going crazy with the axe in the room, right? And the way he orchestrates everybody to take him down, like that's cool to see. Like, look at him. He's practical. You're seeing the character in action.
He's coming up with solutions that work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing too, is like the doc who is doing all the autopsy stuff, and he's just like, he is going crazy, but like the conclusion that he came to first, before everyone else did too, is the exact conclusion that McCready comes to at the end of the film. It's just,
that's true.
We're not coming out of this alive. We're gonna stay here, and we're all gonna die. But like Doc, the doctor performing the autopsy, like he panicked, but he came to the right conclusion. It was just like, we can't leave. There is like, I can't trust any of you, and none of you should be able to leave this compound.
Well, which is interesting because that was Blair, and I guess that must have been before he was the Thing.
I guess.
Because he wouldn't have done that if he was. He would have just, well, first of all, before anybody notices anything's going on, he's already hurt the other guy. Right? Yeah. I think that was Windows, or was it the other?
That was Windows.
Yeah. He already hurt him. If they were alone and nobody recognized that the situation was going on yet, he would have just assimilated that guy immediately.
Yeah, well, that's the thing too. Like he actually killed the one thing that the Thing needed to leave, which was the helicopter.
It's true.
Like if he was assimilated at that point, he just would have driven the helicopter.
But he can't. The person he assimilated doesn't know how to fly.
Well, that's true. But even still,
he would have left it as an option and just said, "McCready, get me out of here."
Yeah, McCready, I need to go home.
So yeah, that's true. So yeah, he couldn't have been the Thing at that point.
Well, that's sure.
He must have got in that shack.
But Windows couldn't have been the Thing at that point either, then, because the Windows would just assimilated him. Like he would have got like.
Well, he didn't end up being the Thing. He was the one who got chomped and ragdolled around.
I thought Windows was the one who.
No, there was two people. They kind of looked the same. One of them was clean shaven, and one of them wasn't.
Okay.
So yeah.
Oh, so Windows was the one who got.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah. Oh man, that leaves now. I'm contemplating. That is an excellent question, though. Is when did he get turned? Because he's the final boss.
Yeah.
He was the final boss, but we're not sure when he got turned. It could have been at any time.
Fingers in the.
I forgot about that effect. That's one that doesn't draw much attention to itself compared to the others, and I'm honestly not sure about that one. But yeah. But again, it's part of the immersion of the film, right? So many little stuff like that you just don't even question because it just happens, and you're just in it. You're in this story, you're in this world, and you believe it, which is the scary thing. All right, one last note about the music. Ennio Morricone, classic soundtrack. There was one comment that I think we both latched onto about a description of the music and the design principle behind it, because obviously it has that classic bass line, which most people remember from this film, the dun 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 dun.
Yeah, that's pretty iconic.
Oh yeah. You see, and there's all sorts of homage to that has appeared in all sorts of music since then. But how did that description go? I think, Lauren, you recited it perfectly earlier. It was
So it's like it's trying to imitate life and imitating a heartbeat, but it's wrong.
yeah.
A heartbeat is like like the heartbeat is like dun 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 dun, but the bass line we hear is dun 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 dun. It's close, but not quite.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a heartbeat, but just a little bit off.
That's cool.
A little bit.
And exactly, right? That is such a great way to use different aspects of the film medium to express the story, right? The music's just perfect, honestly, because even that's the memorable main theme. But I was paying close attention to the ambience and the atmosphere the soundtrack was providing throughout the film, and it's all so good, right? While they're like exploring and stuff, it always perfectly accompanies whatever activity is going on and sets a mood and an atmosphere that doesn't detract from the dreariness of this Antarctic setting.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, it kind of just solidifies it. And that's a tough thing to do, because music can easily detract from something like that, from the atmosphere that they're setting with the icy exteriors. But instead, it just kind of adds to it, and all the atmosphere is just But another deliberate note, and I'll have to watch this again and pay closer attention to this, but I think I kind of started to notice this pattern this time around, but because I only started looking for it partway through, it was hard to be sure. But was it just me, or was there never any music whenever the thing was revealed?
I don't know, maybe.
I don't remember any music.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure every time the thing was revealed, it's always a huge sequence with huge visual spectacle, and only soundtracked by the sound effects and the Foley and the dialogue and the chaos of what's going on. And again, so well shot. Every single VFX shot is impeccably composed, or special effects shot is impeccably composed to make the most out of every single effect that they're doing. It's genuinely impressive work. And as just, I guess, a production note too, for those who don't understand what we meant by like the principal photography wrapping in 3 months, but the effects photography going on for a year. That's the thing you have to understand, is those are all separate, right? Principal photography is your A roll. So those are your close-ups on your actors, all the footage of the actors essentially was all done in like a 3-month period. And that's how it's done with most films. And then you'll have a bunch of separate stuff, maybe on a soundstage or other things for post-production nowadays. But
Cars blowing up and whatnot.
yeah, second unit stuff shot separately. But with this film, they got everything they needed out of the actors in about 3 months, and all the rest of that, more than a year of time was spent purely working on the visual effects, a lot of which were shot on separate stages or on standalone inserts that they just cut in between the main action. And that being like, it's basically a lot of it were basically orchestrated and animated entirely separate from shooting the main acting in the scenes, which means they had a lot of room to very deliberately set up every single effect. And obviously you'd be using a lot of the same sets and then modifying them in a lot of different ways. But a thing you have to also consider, and this is something I didn't think about until I was reading and preparing for this, is a lot of these effects are one-off.
Yeah.
Because they destroy so many of their props and their models in the shots. They literally burn a lot of animatronics and a lot of other, models and things of that nature. And, all the fiberglass and plastics. Well, apparently plastic was a bit of a problem because there was a bit of a safety issue where people didn't realize the sheer flammability of plastic. And apparently there was an explosion that happened at one point, but nobody was seriously hurt.
Oh, that's good. Nobody was hurt.
Yeah.
Because plastic is no good.
Yeah.
Do not burn it. Period.
Do not burn. But that's the thing, right? You have to consider that. A lot of these effects were one-off. They had to get what footage they needed out of it and then destroy it and then burn it, just like they do in the film. And that's...
Oh, man.
Yeah, there's something intense about that, because once you burn it, that footage is locked, right? There's no going back, which is scary as a filmmaker, and yet probably really freeing. And I think, Lauren, you talked about this at one point, not to get too philosophical, but you said like one of the most potent things you can do with art is destroy it. And there's something freeing about destroying your own art, right? Because you look at history, a lot of oppression and, you know, destruction of freedom is often characterized by the destruction of art, right? Book burning, painting burning, things like that. A lot of tyranny is characterized that way. It's often one of the first things to go, because art is one of the last bastions of free speech. It is the means of human expression that opens you to ideas beyond yourself. And you're arguing, I think when we got into a conversation about that, that's because I was talking about a film that somebody shot that would be shown once and then destroyed.
Yeah.
And you were saying there's something super freeing about that.
So, like, my art teacher, who I'm pretty sure was just like a hippie, lots of big ideas about art and all that other stuff. My art teacher in high school said, like, basically the most powerful thing you can do with art is destroy it, and not, but like as a piece of art, like performing art. Destroying art in itself is a work of art, because there's something about the act of creation and then destruction that is the full cycle that you have to experience. And we're really focused on the preservation of art, right? It's like, oh wow, I made this beautiful thing and now I'm going to preserve it so it lasts forever. We archive things. Like the internet is just a giant archival method. Like we publish things on YouTube and we wish it stays there forever. We do all this other stuff, but it's like,
oh, well, look at the Mona Lisa, right?
Yeah.
Look how much effort is put into preserving that.
Yeah.
I think I see where you're coming from here.
Yeah, but art is meant to be enjoyed in the moment, not to be enjoyed then, not to be enjoyed in the past, not to be enjoyed in the future. Now, there is something powerful about this. Is when I can, like, this moment is characterized by me experiencing and absorbing this art into my soul, and never again.
I have
the memory of it.
I have the perfect example for you. Socrates.
It sounded like you said Socrates and soccer.
Socrates.
Socrates. Okay.
Cherry blossoms.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Exactly. That.
They are beautiful when they bloom. Very beautiful. But
Yep.
they only last a few weeks.
Exactly.
And then the blooms are gone.
But if you had that all year long,
It wouldn't be
Okay,
special.
I would appreciate it.
it would not be special. It would not be special. Every fall, the trees get golden and beautiful, and then they go away. And it's beautiful because it doesn't last.
Yeah, I guess there's something to be said about that. Wow, that's a great analogy. And you're saying not only by that virtue of art being enjoyed in the moment, but also the fact that you're taking power away from tyrants to a certain extent when you can destroy your own art, right?
That's also true.
Because you can't destroy it. I have, like, you know, the power over it, and you'll never have that opportunity because I have denied you that opportunity by doing it myself. And I chose to do that.
Mhm.
And
There's that is a statement that is the most powerful statement, artistic statement that you can make.
yeah,
like,
and that's hard.
Because art is all about creation, but to create, you must destroy. In order to create a beautiful painting, you must destroy a perfectly white canvas.
It kind of reminds me of it's Banksy, right? I think that's the artist. When he tried to destroy one of his artworks at an auction.
And it just made it more valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is an interesting commentary in and of itself. Banksy is just full of interesting commentary.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's something to be said about that. And I think that artistry is captured and put on display with the thing in a way that is super unique. Where film, it's like, yeah, we have big ideas about archiving film. And especially the American government has invested a lot in archiving film, right? We have the Library of Congress, one of the biggest libraries in the world, that also works to preserve landmark films.
Yeah.
But with the thing, sure, the film itself has been very well preserved, right? I'm looking at a 4K remaster of it.
Yeah.
But the artistry that went into it, right? The technical prowess contained within every single animatronic, every single puppet, every single one of those things that had to be destroyed to get the shots that they needed. There's something powerful about that for the reasons you stated, right? The fact that in that process, like the shots that you are seeing of these exact models are the only shots that can exist anymore.
Yeah.
Because they destroyed it as soon as they were done with it.
Yep.
And put that in the film.
By nature of the film, they had to destroy it.
By nature of the film, yeah, they had to destroy it. And that's, there's something accidentally beautiful about that.
And I'm not trying to say burn art.
Yeah, please don't.
Yeah, like absolutely.
Well, what you're saying is the power to destroy art lies in the hands of the person who created it.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is destroying art is inherently a statement. If you want to make a statement, destroy art. However, just make sure you're not a tyrant.
Yeah, make sure you're not a tyrant. Make sure, well, I think that's what I'm saying. It lies in the power of the person who created it. Make sure you're not destroying other people's art is the idea.
Yeah. It is up to the artist to determine the lifetime, the life cycle of their own piece, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's something I still feel like I'm coming to terms with because like the archival instinct is so strong. And especially nowadays where we just want to preserve and record everything.
And here's the thing that I think we're coming to in as a creative species, the culture of art and creativity, we're coming to this weird in-between that I think works very well, where exactly like with this film, like you were talking about, the models that they use, the animatronics don't exist anymore, and you cannot recreate those shots, but the footage of it still exists. I think we're getting to a point where archiving the experience
without necessarily archiving the materials.
It's there's this weird kind of in between where like one of the most common forms of entertainment, like you would get like video entertainment, is like blogging, right? Or vlogging rather. Costs nothing to make a vlog, but like it's literally just you're just preserving time. You can't get that time back. You can't recreate that shot because that was yesterday, but it's on the internet forever.
That's true. That is a weird sort of liminal in between.
I don't know.
Wow, deep thoughts. Never thought. Didn't think we'd go there off of the thing, but that just occurred to me just while we were discussing it here.
Yeah. I don't know. I do think you should go through every measure you can to preserve art as much as you can, because it's art is culture. Culture is art. If you lose art, culture suffers. Yeah.
And just as an extra clarifying note, we're also while we're clarifying things, we're also not advocating that. And in fact, we're quite opposed to this idea that like practical effects are inherently better than digital visual effects.
Oh, absolutely not. But like, especially now.
Especially now, yeah.
Thanos looks amazing.
That's true. Thanos does look amazing. Which huge innovation. What a model. And what a render. But that's the thing. They're all tools, and they're tools for telling your story. And it's just a matter of using what's what. And obviously in a lot of blockbuster films, the lazy way is to make everything CGI nowadays if you have the money available to you. But I think the greatest effects are always achieved, especially now, right? And now we're long past the point where any visual you want to achieve is possible, right?
Yeah.
We have long past that point. We probably passed that point sometime in the early 2000s, maybe, right? It's just a matter of how good it has looked is also improved. But I think we passed that point where any visual you want to achieve can be created. And
from practical to visual effect.
But the question
is special to practical effects.
Yeah.
Special to visual effects.
But the decision becomes, what tools do you want to use? And the true artistry comes in using the right tool for the job. And I think some of the greatest film artists of recent generations have really found their place in mastering that balance of finding the right tool for the job. I think a great example would be Guillermo del Toro, right? Strong mix of super practical, textile effects that, you could have walked onto the set and touched, as well as enhanced by visual effects that you really don't notice because of the realness of the tactile effects that draw your eye. But then there are little CG enhancements that make it extra real.
Yeah,
and go by completely invisibly.
My ideal, I guess I would say, like my ideal workflow, if I were to get into big, multi-million-dollar productions, would be to use as much both practical and visual effects as possible. Like there's no reason for me to not, if you have that big of a budget, there's no reason for me to not just say, we'll put that explosion in post. It's like, let's blow something up.
yeah, exactly.
Let's flip this car. Let's do all these practical effects and then enhance them with visual effects. Because yeah, like this does look really good on its own. We did blow that car up, but like it could be a little bit more blowy uppy. Because why not? You have if you have access to both, do both. It's not that any one is better than the other. Like Raph was saying, it's just that the right tool at the right time.
Yeah.
And if you have access to both, if you have multi-million dollars budget, it's like employ makers.
Employ makers. That's a good word. And lest we forget, I think another strong example of somebody that's mastering using the right tool for the job, Denis Villeneuve is also strangely good at this. He did Sicario, Arrival, and most notably what I'm referring to right now, well, he's doing this new Dune movie right now. I don't know how how he produced that one, if he's using these same principles, but most notably what I'm referring to is Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah.
Visually perfect film, and a strong mix of visual effects and practical elements and compositing and just pulling together so many different tricks and the best elements of all of them in order to create a picture that you could not have achieved with any one of them alone. Because yeah, the mix of miniatures and CGI and compositing that he uses in 2049 is just mind-boggling. So good. But yeah, right tool for the job. But this, I think The Thing is a strong example of, because it's back when their options were few, just how to do, right, 100% practical and making the most of it in a way that just holds up so well. And because it was shot on film, will continue to hold up forever. And the cinematography is just so good, so well composed. Everything, all the seams are perfectly hidden where there's nothing that will take you out of it. Even that puppet of when in the same chest chomping scene, right? The big stalk comes out up in the middle and like goes up towards the ceiling. Apparently there's a lot of the tech that's used to puppet that creature is like in the shot, really cleverly hidden. And it's stuff like literally wires suspended from the ceilings. You could see its legs kind of go up into the rafters and like disappear, off the edge of the screen. It's like they're literally just controlling it from up there. The head is being puppeted through a hole in the ceiling that is behind the head. It's literally in the shot, but you can't see it. Like it's perfectly hidden. Such clever use of their resources, making the most of just everything at their disposal and exploiting a 22-year-old Rob Botton almost to death.
Best art is made by exploitation. I'm gonna step by that one.
That one, I would say it's not gonna age well, but it already hasn't.
Like it's not gonna age well only because like it's true.
So, any last minute thoughts? Closing thoughts on The Thing?
Good movie.
It's a good movie, yes.
I think you guys can just tell just how formative of a piece of film this was.
Yeah. This film had such a huge impact on me. And even just watching it again after such a long time, it's just the magic of filmmaking is made real again to me. And I'm reminded of just what you can do with art. This is just peak get-to-itiveness. Yeah, get-to-itiveness. And honestly, my favorite Carpenter film, period. And again, one of my top films of all time, and very likely my top horror film of all time. It's really hard to award that honor because Alien exists. But it's always a toss-up between those two. They're both on like my top films at any given moment, and maybe on the given day I might flip-flop between them. But in the end, it's really hard to argue with the sheer master craftsmanship that's on display throughout this entire film. It's so tight and it's so visually stunning, and it's all in service of a very particular story, however bleak that story may be, however pessimistic it may be. But it says something, and it's consistent, and it's committed to its themes, and while being a visual feast all the while. And I think that's what's special about this film.
That's what makes good art.
Yeah.
All right, well, if there are no other last minute comments, we'd best wind this down before we continue to talk. Because this is just one of those films. Yeah. We so far we have only watched films that we could talk about all night, and probably will only continue to, because that's what film school is about. We're looking at the greats here. No time for, I don't know, something stupid.
Oh man, just wait till we get to Fight Club. I'm not gonna shut up.
There's gonna be too much to
What?
Just wait till we get to Fight Club. I have a lot to say about Fight Club.
There's so much to say about Fight Club. Also, super formative film for us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then The Matrix is gonna. It's like The Matrix is gonna be like a 4-hour film school watch.
Yeah. Well, The Matrix is gonna be a 2-parter, and we're only gonna watch the first film.
Yeah.
I've seen The Matrix.
It's like the first part is just gonna be the preamble, and the second part is just gonna be the after.
Yeah, exactly. 2 whole videos just to talk about that movie.
The Matrix is certainly an interesting movie, that's for sure.
Oh yeah. Another one of our all-time favorites.
Matrix right now.
I mean, of course it is. I mean, you guys are so into martial arts. Why wouldn't it be?
Well, that's the thing, is it's a combination of literally everything I love. Yeah, just all thrown into one movie.
At this point, it seems like martial arts is like the least important thing of that movie. That's like,
it's true.
We want to talk about this. Oh, also, there's a lot of great fighting in it, but like this theme,
yeah, like all they had to do was hire Yuen Wu-ping to have that part down, and so that's a given. But there's so much going on in the ideas of that film that are just such good theme work, such perfect storytelling.
But that's not what we're talking about today.
That's not. Well, next up,
I'm excited about watching films.
Should I outright say where we're heading next? Next film school?
I'm curious.
Okay, yeah. Christmas.
What's the next one?
Yes.
The best Christmas film in the world.
Yes.
Let me guess. Die Hard.
Yep.
Yes.
Next film school is going to be around Christmas time. We're going to watch, I would say, my favorite action movie of all time. That's probably doing it a disservice, because it is generally agreed to be the greatest action movie of all time, Die Hard. I trust Rose hasn't seen it. Troy, have you seen it?
Yeah, I have.
Okay. So you at least got that much culture in you. But, that's going to be a fun one.
About Die Hard.
Literally nothing.
Fantastic.
That's amazing.
That's exactly
Let's do it.
This time I
haven't even heard of it.
Ooh, do you
What
at
was
least
that?
know who Bruce Willis is?
I don't know actor names.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know actor names.
This is going to be great. This is going to be
Bruce
great.
Willis. Okay, so Bruce Willis is the one from Die Hard.
There you go. So next time, look forward to that around Christmas time. Christmas special. This was our Halloween special. Next time, Christmas special. We're watching Die Hard. It's happening. Let's go. Until next time, we'll see you all later. Peace. Squared. Have a good night. God bless.
Good night, sweet dreams. All the good things.
Good night.